What colors heal your energy? How does green heal the heart? How can I create a healing home with color? What chakra colors can I use for emotional wellness? I'm Dorothy Fagan, and this is the Color Alchemist podcast. A visionary painting called The Crossing begins to answer today's most pressing questions. Join me in the studio. I was in the studio on a quiet Sunday morning. I had 8 30-inch square paint canvases aligned in a grid on the wall of the studio. And I was sipping my coffee, and there were blank canvases. And I was just sort of like doing Sunday morning. And the sunrise was coming up on the east side. So my studio is 3 walls of windows. It's a 30-foot sunroom that overlooks my pond. And you'll hear me talk about my pond. The sunlight was coming in those eastern windows and casting a light and shadow of the trees across my canvases. And I looked at that configuration of light and shadow pattern on the canvas, and I just heard the suggestion in my knowing that I should use this composition, that I should draw this. And I laughed out loud, and I thought immediately, well, why not? What can hurt? So I grabbed a big cigar-sized stick of willow charcoal. And willow charcoal is one of my favorite drawing tools, because willow charcoal is simply that, charred willow branches. It's not like the compressed charcoal that you would buy in the art supply store. It's lightweight. It's very delicate. If I touch the canvas lightly with it, it makes a very delicate line, almost like a whisper. And if I tear into it with deep emotion or rage or vehemence or wanting to say something important, it makes a dark, expressive line. And then if I pull back, all of a sudden, the line changes. So it's like it will deliver an EKG of my emotional heartbeat in every single precious moment. So I grabbed this, well, just like the willow tree, the willow charcoal comes in different sizes if you have a thick branch or a thin branch or a twig. So I have a variety of those sizes on my drawing table. And I have one that's about the size of a cigar. So I grabbed that big one and I ran my arm. Now, these canvases are, so picture 5 feet tall. There's 8 canvases, but together they're 5 feet tall and 10 feet wide. So I'm standing in front of it, and my whole body, my whole arm is drawing this line. And even as I'm speaking, my arm is moving. It comes from my body. And I drew that charcoal across where the light and shadow pattern was on the canvas. Now, you know how quickly the sun moves. So the leaves and the trees were like twinkling on the canvas, and they were starting to move across the canvas. So I was moving quickly with that light, and I scratched through a kind of a horizontal diagonal that stroked down through all of the lower 4 pieces. and then some very strong verticals. There was one vertical tree on the right-hand side, and so I stroked it really deeply. And then I stepped back and I thought, oh, okay. Ultimately, I began to feel the color. I want to say I felt the color. I didn't have a word for it at the time I felt it, but I knew that it was going to be runny. And I knew that I didn't want it running on the wall. So I took all of the canvases off the wall and I placed them on the floor. Okay, so now the 5 by 8 foot multi-canvas grid is on the floor and I'm standing over it. And now I'm starting to mix color. So what color? I began seeing this vibrant yellow. So I was using Gamblin's Indian yellow, which is a translucent yellow. And when you mix it with oil medium, it takes on this really deep resonance that you can feel in the solar plexus. It feels golden and like self-confidence, and you can feel it pushing up under your heart, like pushing up, like rising. And I like to use this color underneath my paintings because it peeks out and it uplifts the energy of the paintings. So I was thinking, if there was any thought going on at all at the moment, which there probably wasn't a whole lot of it, but it felt like underpainting. And so I took a big wide brush, like maybe a 4-inch brush, and loaded that paint on and put the yellow in, and I use a flat brush. So the calligraphy of the flat brush, if you think about if I'm stroking with my body, my whole arm is making the stroke. It's not, the energy is coming from my heart and my chest, not my head. So the energy, the creative energy is coming directly from the impulses of the heart down the arm. There's no detour to go into the head and start thinking about whether this is right or wrong or good or bad or any of that. It's an intuitive pulse of energy. So when we think about emotion, emotion is energy in motion. And what I'm doing in this moment, as I'm describing that, is translating this raw creative energy into motion. The body is in motion, and that colorful light from the solar plexus is moving in my body as I'm pushing this on canvas. And as you are imagining this, it is moving it inside of you. So there's some physical execution involved here. So I'm squatting, and then I'm stroking, and then I'm mixing paint, and then we're stroking some more and squatting some more and standing up. So it's become very physical. And as the yellow made its way out onto the canvas, I began to sense the deep sky blues and purples. And so I mixed them up, and those cut through the lower diagonal section of the canvases. So we're cutting across all 4 canvases with the turquoise blues and some purples. And then that deep violet purple went on that vertical stroke where the tree shadow had been. smaller pieces of charcoal, the urge to draw with these smaller pieces of charcoal, like an extension of my signature, where it becomes automatic writing. I'm not thinking about I'm not trying to draw something. I'm just letting the EKG spell itself out across the canvas. Okay, and it's making little hash marks and things. And when I step back, I was immediately startled to see a river crossing. So the blue turquoise in the lower portion became a river in my mind's eye. It's like recognizing myself as the river, and then the one single tree standing upright represented the entire woodlands of my landscape here around my studio garden. And after journaling for so many years, the woodlands immediately represent the woods of life, like not the trees in the forest, but the woods that I have lost myself in, the things that I would do if I could, or if I would, or all of those woods. And I immediately just laughed at the serendipitous, whimsical nature of what the creatrix is saying to me by giving me this painting. So you can hear that painting has become an exploration of what's inside myself. And this is way different than where I began painting. Create sanctuary with healing color. Color alchemy happens in the body to regulate your nervous system, create sanctuary, and restore creative energy. I'll show you my proven method of how colors heal your energy and guide you to creating a healing home that aligns with your inner light. Download my new Earth Goddess Healing Palette and get started today. Find it at flourish.dorothyfagan.com or check the show notes for a link. So let's go back to when I first started working with color in art school. I studied the color theory, Joseph Albers, that a color looks different depending on what's next to it. So the juxtapositions of color matter. If we put a green square in the center of a canvas and we surround it with red, it looks different than if we surround it with gray. Now, you have to look up Joseph Albers and read his color experiments. They're all color plates, if you will, and you can see and experiment with how your perception of color changes. So this was the foundation of my experimental color. After art school, I became a color experimenter and a creativity experimenter. So every project that I did, whether it was a personal painting or whether it was a project that I was doing for a client, I had a whole career of designing for companies and nonprofits and hospitals and the like. But every project was an experiment in the creative process. So how could I trigger the flow of inspiration to deliver whatever it was I needed in the moment? And that was on top of whatever personal emotions might be contained within my own spirit. So that's a lot of management going on. So let's see. If we say that the color resides within us, the energy is within us, and the light is within us, and that the chakra energy centers can be represented by different wavelengths of color light. We could also say that the colors below the heart, the lower half of the body, are earth colors: red, orange, yellow. Now, there's different types of vibrancy. Many people think of earth colors as only the more subdued earth colors. But I would say that the lower half of the body represents earth, and the upper half of the body represents the sky colors: the blue, the indigo, the violet. The heart is a full spectrum of greens, not just one perfect green, but many greens. So if we were to juxtapose colors above the heart with colors below the heart and put them, imagine a pointillist canvas where all the colors are created with small dots of color side by side. And when you step back away from the canvas, across 30 feet across the room, those colors juxtaposed blend in your mind's eye. And so you have mixed them. And there's a vibration happening, a yellow just below the heart and a turquoise blue above the heart. But your nervous system is sensing the green, the blended color. And it's not just a static green, it's an active green. It has a resonance and vibration to it that moves. So when you engage with art, when you look at a painting that a human has created, you are engaging with those energetic color fields, and your intuitive senses are able to feel, your ability to feel these colors is activated. You could say it's through your mind's eye and your optics and that, but it also goes deeper than that, because we perceive with more senses than just our physical senses. We perceive with spirit, and we perceive with emotion, and we embody what we perceive. So, okay, I'm looking at a note here that says gritty earth tone paper. Let's jump, that was getting a little too ethereal, so let's jump back to the grit. Let's jump back to the cave paintings. Prehistoric cave artists stood in the cave and used raw earth pigments, blood-stained blood, blueberries, charcoal, raw umber, sand, clay, iron oxide, to stain the walls. What did they use? Did they have a paintbrush? I don't think so. It would be it would mix the color with some some water, liquid form, stain the wall, put it on with the hand. Use maybe an animal skin to apply it. Drive the grit down into the wall. So here's a connection with Earth that our ancestors have. As a teenager, I had the opportunity to stand in the caves at Altamira. It forever stays with me. The goddess, something in my being knows that a woman stood in that cave and painted that wall. We assume the cave dwellings were occupied by cavemen. I would argue that there were women there. So let's jump again. I want to talk about color alchemy and what exactly it is. I looked it up on Google, and Google gives anything from interior design to hair dyeing to something that the medieval pre-chemists did to try to turn base metals into gold. And I would like to pose a new interpretation for New Earth, that color alchemy is something that happens inside yourself. When you feel the emotional resonance of color within yourself, and with intention, balance and harmonize your inner being with the color. So think of the wavelength of light that runs through you. There's this river. We just stepped across the river, across the threshold of the crossing painting. Now let's turn the river sideways and run it from the base of the spine, out the top of the head, and it is a continuous rainbow of light from red to oranges, through the yellows and the goldens, up into the yellow greens and the blue greens and the verdigris and the turquoise. And now we're up into the voice. And then as we come up into the face, we're into the indigos and the cobalt blues and all of the intuitive senses, those knowings that just happen, I can remember, oh my gosh, 40 years ago, someone would walk into my studio and I would already know what they were going to ask for and what they were going to say, but I didn't believe that that was so. And so I would listen to them for an hour of whatever it was, and then they would finally get to the thing that I already knew when they walked in the door. The sense of knowing what you already know and trusting it may take a lifetime to accept, because our culture hasn't been in a place where we accept those knowings as grounded, as tangible and trustworthy. And across now with this crossing, those knowings, the presence of being are ours. And it's okay to trust them. Okay, so I didn't just land here. I want to run through some stages of iteration of my palette development from the time of plein air painting, when I completed my color studies and received my Bachelor of Fine Arts. I started working in pastel. And pastel is raw pigment made into a crayon. It's a dry stick. And so you can draw with it or you can paint with it. But by paint, I don't mean make it wet. It's dry painting. So my pastel palette in the late 70s would be hundreds of colors. I would have a 4-by-6-foot table all laid out with little finger-sized pastels in a myriad of colors. And so my color process developed by grabbing the color, like if you could think of all of those colors on the table, all calling to you like as if they were a room full of kindergarten children. And there's one of them that is saying, me, 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 pick me, pick me, pick me, the loudest. That's the one I would pick. So my intuitive sense of which color to start with became immediate, like shooting from the hip, grab and go. That's a very emotional response, and it doesn't require too much thought. So initially, my process was to draw a white paper, and I would use an earth tone pastel, and my drawing would be outlines of a naturescape, woodland landscape. And I would draw the outlines, and then I would come back and I would intuitively color in. And that's a little bit misleading, I guess, because my technique quickly evolved into a stroking nature. So there would be vertical strokes side by side where colors would be juxtaposed. And so you would step back. My papers were large, so 30 by 40 inches, even though it's a drawing, large scale papers. And so almost tapestry-like in the way they looked like they were woven together. So after a number of years of this, I gained some recognition with my pastels. They were accepted for some shows, national exhibitions in New York, and whatnot. I was at home raising 3 babies, so I didn't travel too much. I stayed in the studio and I took care of kids. Then the assault happened, and it took me 10 years to admit that someone tried to kill me. But the day after I was attacked, I couldn't paint those pastels the same way anymore. There were so many emotions that were all screaming to get out at once. It was like the room full of kindergartners, only they were all screaming. The paper was no longer white. I had earth tone paper. And my technique for drawing did not involve a preliminary drawing. I was suddenly using earth colors, and I was scratching earthy fields of color. And I began going out in the landscape, and I would always take someone with me, because quite honestly, I was afraid to be out there by myself. And so I would take my husband with me and the children. And so there was a lot of commotion with whatever we were doing in the landscape, but I would be over there scratching these earth colors. And looking back on that, I can see now that the earth colors were a way of regulating my nervous system. So my nervous system was totally out of whack from being traumatized. And it almost doesn't matter what kind of trauma, life-threatening trauma. It took me 10 years to admit that even though the person that hurt me was convicted of attempted murder, it took me 10 years to admit that was so. So there was a lot of denial going on. And during that time, what was coming out of my paintings was this need to feel grounded, to feel safe. And the earth colors provided that. So expression of all of the emotions that have no words. When we are traumatized by something, no matter what it is, all of there's not words for how we feel about something so traumatic. I mean, even getting through one day now just watching the news is emotional. So we don't have words for all of that, nor should we need words for all of that. We can regulate the nervous system with simple practices of letting the energy out. And so I have developed a process over all these years that I call splash scribble. And simply, the splash is color and the scribble is line. Now, this sounds overly simple, but what this does is release the color. Okay, so we're releasing some energy from one of the chakras or two of the chakras. So if we said, okay, let's take a small square of paper, 6 inches square. Let's make it small so it's manageable. And we put 2 colors on there. It doesn't matter which 2 colors, just the 2 colors that attract your attention. And we're going to splash those 2 colors together. You can use a palette knife, you can use a brush, you can use a pastel, you can use a crayon. It doesn't matter. Put them on there. And while they're wet, grab a dark, heavy pencil or a piece of charcoal or a pastel and scribble in it. And when I say scribble, I mean like sign your name and keep going until it stops. The flow will automatically stop when your nervous system hits that moment of peace. So in every painting that I have ever painted, the way I can tell when it's complete is when the flow stops, when it feels peaceful. Not peaceful, but at peace. So if you stand in front of a painting and you feel tension, then there's something wanting to be expressed. If you stand in front of the painting and you're not feeling the urge or the tension or the frustration or the question, whatever that spark is, if there's no spark there, I know a lot of people say that means they lost the inspiration, but that's a short-sighted disconnect. It's not that you lost the inspiration, it's that you arrived at a moment of peace. And peace is momentary, and the only place that peace can be created is within yourself. And so I'm a woman on a mission here. Let's create peace, one moment at a time. If I have a little bit of peace today, I might find it in the garden, sitting on the bench, stillness. And then the next moment, I might start feeling tension. And I might bring that tension in and scribble on the canvas, and then something is at rest. So that the energies, the wavelengths of light within us are designed to move. When we clog it all up and just withhold it and withhold it and withhold it and don't say anything, don't express anything, especially those deep feelings that don't have words, those are the ones that we really, I think what I want to say is that the deeper and the more some emotions feel like I'm hitting a wall or that they're just going to eat me alive, those are the ones that have the greatest gold under them. And so I've learned to paint bigger. When I paint bigger, it releases bigger tensions. It releases bigger messages from the creatrix and greater gifts. So greater sense of knowing and a greater trust of the light that's within me, the light that's within all people. And so now I listen to all people like the light is within each of us. And each of us has something important to say, something important to experience. Our light matters. And this world needs our light, all of our light. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Know someone who would be interested in this conversation? Share it today. Find the link in the show notes. Create your own sanctuary healing color palette. Download the free guide today. You'll find it in the show notes or at flourish.dorothyfagan.com.